Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon New World tank, and for a while now I've been talking about getting in here and removing this big piece of wood. You can see that big shiner right there has the white mark on the side of it. That's where it lost a bunch of scales recently. I can only assume it got kind of wedged in somewhere, and as it forced its way and wriggled its way back out, it scraped a bunch of scales off of its side. It was pretty rough and raw looking for a few days, but I've been keeping an eye on it. It is definitely healing and getting better each consecutive day, so I'm not concerned about it. But the tank really needs some more swimming room. I've got a lot of woodwork in this tank. I've got this piece, and then I've also got a very large piece down there. I know we got a lot of glare on the tank right now, but that's not what really this video is going to be about. It's going to be the actual removal of this piece here. So I've got the camera set up on a tripod. I'm just going to let it roll while I get in there and do my thing, and I'll do a fast forward of me pulling it out of there or whatever we're going to do, and then we can have a look at the tank and talk about it again afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to have to do will be pull that light bar down and get that out of my way completely. I'm then going to have to remove all of that water sprite right there, because I believe the middle section is where that big piece of wood's going to have to come out of there. And I've also considered getting my saw and simply cutting some of these larger pieces of the wood off so I can get it out of there more easily. It's not going to get used for anything else. It's only going to go out in my brush pile next to my burning barrel, and the next time I'm out there it'll get thrown in the burning barrel, and that'll be the end of that piece of wood. But it's a little difficult to get in there, so I may have to get my saw to get it out. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. But let me get started and you'll see what I'm talking about once we actually get in there, and you can see how big that piece of wood is once we get that Java fern out of the way. I'm sorry, water sprite out of the way.
Now, I will say that pulling this light bar down was probably the most difficult aspect of this whole project. It's a big unwieldy light bar. It's not real complicated the way I've got it hung. In fact, I'll actually attach a card showing you how I've got it hung up there. I just shoot a video about that one time. But it's kind of a pain in the butt. I had to pull it down. I set it on top of the exercise equipment I've got back there. Some of the draping I have to block the view for my YouTube videos gets knocked down in the process, which is not that big a deal, but I got to put all that back up later. And of course, once I've taken the light down, that pretty much was our light source in the tank. So now I have to go and take the light that I use for my waterfall tank, which is just a sort of clip-on desktop lamp that I have a floodlight screwed into, and I go ahead and get that set up. And once we've got some light back on the tank, everything else is sort of self-explanatory. You can just sit back and watch how I go ahead and get that piece of wood pulled out of there. Now, I will say this came out a lot more easily than I was expecting it to. When I put it in there, I had a lot of trouble really getting it in there. I had to sort of bend the plastic brackets on the top a little bit to get it underneath of it. I thought I was going to have trouble getting it out, but the only thing that's really going on there is, if you'll notice at the base of the piece of wood, there's some pieces sticking off, and they're getting caught on the larger piece of wood that's still in the tank. As soon as I figured that out and kind of moved them out of the way, the whole piece comes right on up and out of the tank. Now, if you're wondering what I'm looking at, I'm actually looking for any fish or any other small snails or anything that might have been on that piece of wood. And once I pull it out of the tank and set it on the floor, they would certainly be stranded there. So I'm just trying to give it a good once over to make sure I don't forget anybody or miss anybody. And now that I'm satisfied with that, we can go ahead and just get the glass wiped down. We'll get in there, we'll do a little bit of a gravel vac, get some of that mulm and stuff cleaned out of there. Again, all this stuff's pretty basic tank maintenance kind of stuff. Now, I didn't do a huge water change, and I didn't change the filter or anything. All I did was wipe down the glass and do a simple vac to remove some of the mulm. You can see I've already put the light bar back up. I didn't get any of that on video. Well, actually I did, but it was kind of tedious, took forever, and a lot of it was me spent on a step stool right in front of the camera, and I didn't think you all wanted to look at my butt while I was hanging lights up, so we left that part out. So once we get done with a little bit of gravel vacuuming, drain the tank a little more, fill it back up, we'll call it good. And yes, after wiping the cyanobacteria off the wood, I am spraying it down with hydrogen peroxide.
All right, everybody, that is our end result. Now, my regular viewers from back in the day will remember that this was what we started with. I didn't really change anything around. All I did was remove that big piece of wood. The original big piece of wood was always in there, but it still just looks like such an open, spacious tank now that that big piece of wood is out of there. And it almost doesn't really feel like I need to get in there and spend a lot of time reducing the stock in this tank. I know it's still a heavily stocked tank, but it just doesn't seem like it's so completely overstocked the way it was before. And in theory, it's got more volume of water in the tank since I moved that piece of wood. I don't know how much water that wood displaced, but whatever it displaced, a few gallons maybe, we've got that much more water in the tank, not to mention the actual swimming around room. The water sprite got tore up pretty good. I ripped a bunch of the dead stuff out, and it turns out that this stuff up here had grown in such tight balls and wadded together so tightly that it was almost impossible to separate and pull apart, and I wound up having to just tear chunks of it out and break it up. So I don't know how much all that disturbance is going to do to it. I rinsed the root ball out a little bit, but as you can see, it's still got loads of, we'll call them nutrients, available to them. So the water sprite should still be growing pretty vigorously and doing pretty well. And I also separated another chunk of it off that had good living roots on it, and I set it over here, so we'll see what happens with that. I guess I could try planting some of it in the tank and see what goes on, but I would imagine these silver dollars would tear a tender plant like the water sprite to shreds. In fact, you can see how the roots of this are not really that long and flowing, and that's probably because the silver dollars nip the roots away as they grow and develop. So other than that, not a lot to talk about with the tank itself. That's the water sprite I pulled out of here. And you can see I pulled a lot out. It's a big old wad of the stuff. And then here is our piece of wood. It's kind of heavy to hold up with one hand, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of what it looks like. It is just a fantastic looking piece of wood. I may actually just go throw this out in the garden. I've got some other pieces of wood that I had in some tanks that were too big, and I wound up taking them outside and just putting them in the garden. And this is certainly one that's got enough of an interesting look to it that it would go well in the garden. It's actually still kind of slimy. And this is a shelf liner. It's always good to throw one of them down on the carpet before you throw wet stuff on it, as if this carpet hasn't seen worse than just a little bit of water. Anyway, there you go. That is what the tank now looks like. And we'll have to wait to see what happens with the water sprite growing in, and we will have to wait to see whether or not I really decide to pull any of those fish out of there, or if we just leave the stocking density the way it is. So thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss any of the updates on this tank or anything else. You never know what it's going to be with me. Thanks again, and I will see you real soon in the next one.